let's talk about machetes. Because
Unrelated.
glad you made that clarification and distinction. We are not. Yeah, we're going to talk about knife attacks in Melbourne because I stumbled across a 7 News story and this was the opener. So let's just dive straight in.
Melbourne's machete epidemic has spread to a sporting event as masked men gate-crash Rugby League's Harmony Cup in Broadmeadows. Frightened children were among the spectators caught in the mayhem.
That's the exclusive swipe that commercial TV often has. Melbourne's machete epidemic. I was like, oh, damn. This was an exclusive story. And an epidemic suggests that it's widespread and that it's spreading. So I'm expecting evidence of some of this. So now listen to the reporter's first line as the package opens.
Terrorising families with a very Victorian weapon. 2 hooded thugs, one waving a machete, run through a crowd at Seabrook Reserve in Broadmeadows around 9 last night.
Okay, that's intense.
I have no doubt that it would have been terrifying. And so you hear a terrified scream.
Yeah.
He's got a knife. And I guess what makes this story like such a big deal for 7 News is they got the CCTV or the camera footage exclusively. And for someone who's worked in commercial TV, there is nothing they love more than some knife-wielding CCTV footage. It'll be the top of the bulletin in most cases. And so I'm not denying that it would have been terrifying.
Yeah.
So then there's a bunch of vox pops because this happened at a rugby league kind of harmony event.
Which is when they do they talk to people on the street.
Punters.
Like, what do you think?
Punters was like, it was scary. We don't know what they wanted.
Yeah.
But then the reporter alludes to, so no one was injured, no one was hurt. No, somebody had a knife. They ran around, then they ran out. The reporter even alludes to the fact in the story, it may just be some guys being reckless, and his piece to camera doesn't give any evidence other than, and they may have left the car park here, stands in the car park and talks about how they may have gotten away.
Okay.
But to start a piece talking about an epidemic, I expected something then a bit of exclusive camera footage of somebody with a machete. And, maybe some evidence that this is an epidemic, maybe some data, maybe this is the 65th attack to happen in 12 hours.
Well, this is what I was going to ask, because usually they do start with the most dramatic stuff at the top and you can understand why. And then they'll have like a graphic that's 3/4 through the story.
Absolutely.
That's like over the past 2 years.
Or a piece to camera.
Yeah, or
going,
something. Yeah.
And this is just the first of 58 attacks since January.
Yeah, so?
I've done these stories a billion times when I did crime in commercial TV. And this follows months of reporting in this vein. And it follows the high-profile tragic deaths in Melbourne, including machete deaths, including 12-year-old Chol Acheg and his 15-year-old friend Dao Akuing in September. Horrible that 2 very young men were killed in a machete attack. And also staying with 7 News, they published just a couple of weeks ago, and most people will remember the random stabbing of a woman. Remember there was CCTV, a woman's just walking down the street and another woman just kind of like randomly stabs her. Horrible. Very random, very rare. Which begs the question, unless you've got a bit of CCTV footage, is this a crime crisis?
Right.
Because audiences are being told time and time again that there is a crisis. It's a crisis. There's a machete epidemic, particularly for Victoria.
Yeah.
So then I thought, okay, well, 7 News may opt for the hyperbole, but the narrative is also being spread by other places like the ABC. So here's a headline from the ABC, although in this case it's attributed, even though it's factually incorrect, to the opposition. So the headline is stabbing attack in Melbourne CBD. That's the woman random stabbing attack. Who, she survived, but she got stabbed.
Yeah.
Stabbing attack in Melbourne CBD. More evidence. Victoria is the nation's crime capital, the opposition says.
Yeah. Those 2 words, opposition says, really doing some strong heavy lifting in that headline, right?
Enormous.
Yeah.
Right. And at least they've attributed it to something or someone. But I reckon it's pretty and I read the article, there is nothing to suggest that Victoria is the crime capital. But by then, it has landed with audiences.
Yeah. And there have been those, very high-profile CCTV instances. And there was also Victoria's Crime Statistics Agency released new data that showed that, crime was at the highest level on record. That was recent, I think, in June that happened.
Yes. Yeah. So yes and no in terms of those data, because details matter. Let me talk you through it. In the 12 months before June 30 this year, Victoria Police recorded, yes, an 18.3% rise in criminal incidents. But there's also been a 12% increase in the population.
Mm-hmm.
Then when you look at Melbourne more particularly, just wait, bear with me.
Okay, yep.
That's the local government area with the highest rate of crime. That's a 17.4% increase since last year. However, when you measure crime on a per capita basis, because you have to take into account the increased population, Melbourne's crime rate is actually lower today than it was in 2017 when it's done on a per capita basis.
Is it?
Yes. So in particular in Melbourne, homicides are at a 10-year low with just 2.6 per 100,000. And if we are going to look at what that increase was across the state,
Right.
59% were property related and 39% were theft. But machete epidemic, everybody.
Right.
Knife crime.
I see. Okay.
Homicides in particular are at a 10-year low. And per capita crime in Melbourne is actually lower than it was in 2017.
I
mean, so what are you all talking about?
Yeah.
You got some CCTV. We have these tragic deaths of these young men, not even young men, boys. Sure, terrible. But the hysteria and the crime capital and the Victoria's weapon of choice, that's just outrage. Like, that's moral hysteria.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it happened in Queensland as well with the Queensland election where both major parties went really tough on youth crime. And I think one of them had the tagline, adult crime, adult time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there was a piece that I read actually in the ABC that I thought was quite a good piece, after the election had happened and after all of this hysteria had been whipped up, that just categorically debunked the fact that youth crime was on the rise in Queensland.
Well, Sky News, interestingly, and probably for their own political purposes or agenda, at the same time that some outlets were talking about Victoria being the crime capital, Sky News and news.com were talking about Queensland being the crime capital. So it's like, which is it, bro? Which one is it? Depending on which outlet it is and depending on who has an election and depending on the kind of the political climate, depending on what laws want to be passed. Because usually what happens is this kind of hysteria, then there's a push and then there's kind of knee-jerk reaction by police to be like, we are tough on crime. Then they bring in things like a machete ban or something else. And everybody's so scared because we've been scared by so many outlets that then there's support for it. And it doesn't actually get to the root of what often is needed to come down on crime, which is really boring stuff, which is social policies, which is long-term stuff, which is like fixing disadvantage, which is trying to break the rate of recidivism, which is early intervention, like really boring, unsexy stuff. As a whole, crime has been on the decrease, on the decrease across the country. You would never believe it if you listen to politicians or opposition leaders or the headlines. And then it actually sticks. Like, I speak to my sister who lives in Melbourne, or I speak to my in-laws, God bless their souls, who watch back-to-back commercial TV. They watch all of the news bulletins and whatever they miss. And then if you speak, they're terrified. They're terrified because everything's so bad and young people are stabbing and killing everybody. They absolutely believe it.
I feel like this is one of this is top 3 media trope, baby. Like, it just happens cyclically every few months, every few years. There's a crime wave somewhere and the kind of hysteria wheel turns. And I remember, we both remember growing up in the western suburbs in the late 90s and early 2000s in Sydney, where there was so much hysteria around the crime rates involving Lebanese gangs. And which there was crime involving Lebanese gangs. I'm not denying that because that is a fact.
And the more you police it, because they had the Middle East crime gang, which is like the most overtly kind of like racial profiling in New South Wales, a Middle East crime squad, which has now been disbanded. Surprise, surprise, the more you look for something, the more you'll find it. And then some would say with like Victoria Police, came out and they were like, because of this kind of hysteria, and after that the horrible deaths of these 2 young men, they started to go and proactively look for and seize more knives. So then they come out and say, we've seized more knives. And it's just like, well, you know what happens when you look under the pillow? You find more chip crumbs, right? Because you looked.
Sure.
That's not to say that it's not a good thing to get knives. But then that goes, okay, well then they've seized more knives. Next minute, Premier Jacinta Allen, machete ban.
I wish I had a way to stop this from happening. well, the crime, but also the reporting on the crime.
Because-
like I feel like we're just, again, it's one of those things that's like, sure, we can tell you about this now. It's going to happen again in a few months somewhere else. It's going to happen again in a few years somewhere else with a different community in a different location. Like, how do we get off that hamster wheel?
Yeah.
Because it sells.
Yeah, well, here's a
It's
statistic.
sexy and it's not sexy. It's frightening.
It's frightening.
It triggers that kind of like foundational emotion.
Yeah, and look, here's a statistic I want to leave people with.
Yeah.
Big crimes like murder and drug offences are way down, particularly in Victoria. But that's not like a headline that anyone seems eager to shout. It's like, serious crime is down. Have you seen that anyway?
I haven't.
Right? So, like, that's for you, Edarati.
Fix the headlines yourselves, damn it.
Yeah, it's just like, no, but just also for their sense, because I'm sure
Yeah.
many people are also going, oh, well, they're just like knives everywhere at shopping centres and I'm going to get stabbed. It's really, really very, very, very unlikely.
Yeah. Okay. Good point. Good point to leave it on.